morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Whenever you're listening to us, thank you for joining the Football Diary podcast. I'm hosting today. My name is Myles, and I'm joined by that cheeky red devil, Dave Holt. How you doing, Dave?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. Well, I'm even better. Mike's not here, so we're off the leash. We can do what we want. Maybe we should just spend the whole podcast doing a review of what's going on in French football.
Why not?
For me. So instead, we'll focus on what's going on in England. Starting off with West Ham really upsetting the title race and maybe joining it themselves. Probably not, but maybe with a 3-2 win over Chelsea, who were my front runners for the league title day from the start of the season. I don't know how you feel about them at this point, but what did you make of this game in particular, and West Ham managing to take 3 points from Tommy Tuchel's side?
Yeah, it was an intriguing game. Quite interesting what David Moyes said post match, and said that he felt as though they didn't actually play that well. Which, to be fair, I'd say in moments, Chelsea had their moments and chances which they didn't capitalise on, and West Ham were just clinical, and they really kind of took advantage of the opportunities that Chelsea sort of gave them, and definitely made them pay for their mistakes. But again, it's kind of testament to West Ham's, ability to be clinical. We've seen them; they've scored far more goals, not just this season, but towards the end of last season. They weren't really a team known for scoring a lot of goals, and they're not struggling to score goals. So obviously, you can say about Chelsea, the mistakes that they did make, and obviously Mendy. There was a few moments actually where Bowen went to close him down on a few occasions and got very close to taking the ball off of him. And he managed to take advantage of one of those opportunities. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the performance, I felt as though you got to give credit to them. They're really starting to step up to the bigger teams and starting to kind of get points from the bigger teams. And I think it's probably where they've struggled a little bit in the past, and maybe paid a little bit too much respect, I think, to some of the bigger teams. And I felt that as a United fan. I think there was a game last season when they just let us pretty much dominate the game and made it easy for us. But they're for sure starting to show they're more of a force. Definitely, probably you could even say maybe what are they, a top? Is it too premature to call them a top 6 team now?
I'm not sure. I wonder whether even beyond that, with the way that they're playing right now, and we'll come to that in a little bit. I think they're definitely Man City's best friends at the moment, taking points at Liverpool and Chelsea. But they really rose to this occasion, didn't they? I think you look at Edouard Mendy's performance was probably the worst he's had in a Chelsea shirt, fresh off the back of him being named the second best goalkeeper in the world, which is a bit frustrating for him. But West Ham definitely forced that out of them, didn't they? Their work ethic was just fantastic. You touched briefly on Jarrod Bowen then and his pressing game, and obviously he got a goal as well as winning the penalty. But what do you make of Jarrod Bowen in particular? Because he had that funny spell, didn't he, where he didn't score for, I think, 17 or 18 games. But other than that, he looks a really tidy player, doesn't he? Really lively up front. What's his ceiling?
Yeah, like you mentioned there, is certainly an interesting player. It wouldn't surprise me if an international call-up was on the horizon for him, because he's been playing, performing well for you'd probably say maybe the last year or so for West Ham. Kind of watching him, and again, when you're playing against West Ham, he's not a player you like to see on the ball either. He's full of energy, endeavour. He's quite direct in the way he plays. He wants to get shots off and he wants to score goals. And obviously, he took his goal brilliantly. And obviously managed to win them a penalty. And he creates havoc, and we saw that with him. And kind of for people who saw him in the Championship, he was full of promise, and it was Hull City, wasn't it, that he came from? And you have to wonder, kind of, just that's the question, isn't it? Kind of how far can he go? And you kind of look at him really, and obviously how kind of Liverpool went in the market for Jota from Wolves. I think it's a little bit of an unknown quantity, and is there potential there, unfounded potential. Just how good can this player be? Because he could fit a system like Liverpool's, I think, Bevan. He's full of running. He's able to press from the front. His pressing's brilliant. And he can score goals. So it'll be interesting to see whether West Ham keep hold of him. And some of the bigger teams. I don't mean in disrespect to West Ham. Obviously,
No.
They're finding their way up the table, but whether there will be a team up there that thinks they could potentially use him and he'd be a key player in the Premier League.
Well, I don't want to talk about Diogo Jota, to be honest, because I think he was on a personal mission this week. He knew I'd put him in my fantasy team and then decided he was just going to do everything he could to not score against Wolves, including maybe taking a grudge out on Connor Cody and thinking, I would rather hit you in the nuts with this ball than score. An absolutely amazing miss from him. But of course, Liverpool got their win anyway. But back to this game, you said about Bowen taking his goal particularly well. He wasn't the only one. Masuaku's goal. Not really sure what to make of that. Should the goalkeeper do better? If the player who's kicking the ball doesn't expect it to go where it does, can the keeper expect it? I mean, it's just chaos, really, for Chelsea to lose a point in that sort of fashion, isn't it? But we see it happen in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most bizarre ones you see. Kind of when you hear about a goal that's come from a cross, you kind of expect it to have looped over and go into that far corner, or kind of get out of the goalkeeper's reach. But to see that how it went in was bizarre, really, and it didn't look right. Like the physics of how the ball the trajectory of it, how it went into that near post, looked ridiculous. And yeah, I think you can say, obviously, could the goalkeeper have done better? I don't really know, because he was he was set himself for taking the cross, which we've seen Mendy's got good commandment of his box. So I think it'd be a bit harsh, really, to that. The player clearly didn't mean to score from there. He'd say that, it's ridiculous to even say that a player needs to shoot from that position. He's had a bit of luck, but fair play to him. You've got to make your own luck sometimes. And
they were in the game at that point, so that without that, then it didn't really matter, did it? So they did all they could. You said earlier about, can you call West Ham a top 6 side, or is it premature to? They currently sit 4th. Now, they had this big stadium move, which took a while to settle, but seems to be going a lot better now. David Moyes has obviously improved massively with the team, and they've got some pretty tidy players. They haven't got many household names necessarily. I think Declan Rice is probably their talisman now, but short of that, there's no one really there that you look at and go, yeah, they're a phenomenal world-class footballer. Yet they still continue to upset the apple cart, really, and they still sit in 4th. What can West Ham achieve this season? And if you were a West Ham fan, what would you be hoping for at this stage in the season now?
Well, I mean, we've seen crazy things happen. To say they could finish 4th, I wouldn't say it's unrealistic, but it really depends on the teams around them as well. You see the likes of Tottenham obviously looking a lot better than what they were towards the start of the season. Now Conte's come in, and United obviously made changes with Rangnick, and they look good as well. So it's a matter of whether they can compete with the likes of those teams. And let's be honest, like you say now, they're probably man for man weaker than both of those, but it's a collective, as we know, the game itself. So I'd say they're definitely not one of the front runners to finish 4th, but I wouldn't rule them out. We've seen like the Leicester win the Premier League in the last.
They're the anomaly now, aren't they? You can't say that anyone can't achieve anything in football anymore, because as soon as you do, someone comes back to you and go, yeah, but Leicester though. So who knows with West Ham? As for Chelsea though, obviously they've had a really strong start to the season, but have started to look a bit more vulnerable at times. Obviously they had that injury to Lukaku and Timo Werner go out, and they still seem a little bit short in areas. Ben Chilwell's injury seems to have affected them as well. So what about Chelsea? They've obviously dropped off top spot now. Mason Mount scored an absolutely wonderful goal in this game. But what do they do from here to make sure that they don't fall out of this title race when Liverpool and Man City are looking so good?
Yeah, they've obviously, made a number of mistakes in that game. like not that game alone. I mean, even against United, when Mendy got the ball straight from gave the ball straight to Fred, and that could have been potential loss.
Should have been,
yeah. You've just squared it. So I don't know if they kind of just have to go back to basics a little bit with things and kind of analyze. They're clearly producing too many of these mistakes, which are leading to chances. But I think the thing about Tuchel is from when they have had a setback recently, they've been able to turn it around fairly quickly. So I feel as though that's what he'll be looking for. And obviously, we're coming to the midweek in Champions League now, where he'll probably be looking just for a bit of a kind of just get a bit of momentum from another victory and go into the weekend with a positive mindset. But I don't think it'll affect him too much. And as we've seen this season, when they have had a couple of setbacks, they've come back and won games. So, and the only interesting thing for me is where they go with Lukaku now, because obviously we've seen him came off against West Ham, and they've obviously played without him for a little bit now, because obviously he had I think he had a niggle, didn't he? So it'd be interesting to see if he comes straight back in and how they go about playing with him, because we've seen a lot of him this season really so far for a number of reasons.
Yeah, not quite lived up to it yet, has he?
But I still feel like they're trying to find how to play with him in that role. So
that's not uncommon with Chelsea when they sign a striker. They've had Timo Werner for over a year now, and he still doesn't really seem to have his firm place in there yet. Their goals are coming from very different places than necessarily whoever their number 9 is. I mean, you look at Kai Havertz. There was a lot of talk that he would almost play as the number 9 as well, and he's not really had that much of a big part yet this season. So Chelsea have got a few issues to iron out, it looks like, even though they do have such a wonderful squad. Now, one team who didn't have any issues this weekend were Manchester City. They rose to the top of the league after a 3-1 win over Watford, after also beating Aston Villa in midweek. And a standout performer in both of those games, and pretty much their season so far, it's easy to say, was Bernardo Silva. After a lot of talking to some of the Bernardo Silva was on his way out of Man City, really, particularly after the signing of Grealish, there was a lot of talk of him even moving to AC Milan. And now all of a sudden, he's the first name on the team sheet for Man City. How do you think that's happened, Dave? And what have you made of Bernardo Silva's season in particular so far?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because obviously Pep, made it known that Bernardo Silva wanted to leave summer. And for one reason or other, that didn't happen. And it's strange whether, I don't know, they could get the money for him that they wanted, or the decision, the player changed his mind. Interesting, really, because he did have a massive off season last year, and it was clear that the manager kind of favoured Mahrez. It seemed to be Mahrez or Sterling that seemed to be, the predominant wingers or inside forwards, whatever you call them. So I think everyone knew how good of a player he was, and I'm sure he wasn't, short of options if he did want to move, because we've seen what a fantastic player is, and especially in the big games as well. His work rate as a player, he's fantastic off the ball, pressing, he's brilliant. He suits Man City down to a T, and I'm not enjoying seeing how well he's doing, because he's definitely making a difference, and like you say, he's scoring goals again. So I'm not surprised, because of we know how good of a player he can be. But it's I think I'm probably a little bit surprised, sort of, that he's kind of seems to be sort of leading their charge in a way. I think everyone's kind of having a little bit of a bit part role at the moment, and we're yet to see City at their best, but they're churning wins out convincingly, and getting enough done. And I think the thing I find with Man City is they seem to kill games off in crucial moments. They'll get a second goal at the end of the first half, and they won't leave it at a precarious position with 1-0 or and even if they do, they're able to control games, as we've seen them do for a number of years now. Just kind of pass opposition to death.
I do wonder how long that will last, though, to an extent, because in this game and in their midweek game, they did sort of let the opposition back in. So obviously they were 2-0 up against Villa, and then Ollie Watkins managed to score and bring it back to 2-1. And Watford made it 3-1 in this game, and then had a really good chance of adding a second to it as well. I wonder if later on in the season they'll have the consistency to keep it up and not let those kind of odd goals turn into draws or even losses. It is something that they'll need to address. But with Bernardo Silva, you mentioned his work rate, and I thought his first goal was a real good example of that. If you look at the way he followed that ball in and put it in from a really tight angle, that was just someone who was determined to score there. He wanted it more than anyone else on the pitch. He wasn't going to give up. So as much as his second goal was really beautiful for the finish and the way he cut inside, that first goal to me was exactly why Bernardo Silva is where he is this season, because he's just working for it. Even his goal against Villa, he ran the length of the pitch to get onto the end of that, and the technique to hit that volley. I know, obviously, we missed out on covering the midweek games through just the schedule of our podcast, but that goal is worth mentioning because what a finish that was in particular. To hit that first time like that, it was brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was all about technique, wasn't it? Really, he didn't have to put a lot of effort into that finish. It just kind of, landed perfectly onto the side of his boot and, went straight in, brilliant finish. Those are the goals you want to see, really. And it's not very often you see finishes like that, to be fair, and, nailed it. I think, what you say about, he seems to have a bit more motivation for whatever it is. He's kind of seems to be really be chomping at the bit to kind of, I wouldn't say kind of prove any doubters wrong, but kind of establish himself in that team as kind of as a key player, and he's got an integral role in that first 11, which there's been players that have been kind of coming in and out of that team. Obviously, I'd probably say we've not seen Mahrez as much this season. Probably we did in the first 11 last year. So, like we say, there's so many players that they've got to do their bit. That there's plenty of games throughout the season. I'm sure we'll see.
It's
obviously Foden's just coming back in again now as well.
Yeah. It's a funny one for Bernardo Silva as well, because it's not just at club level he has to go through that, obviously. At international level, in any other generation, he'd be the star name for Portugal, but he's come into a team where he's competing in attacking positions with the likes of Bruno Fernandes and Ronaldo and Diogo Jota, and even at Man City, he's got that competition as well. So that motivation in him is really key, because he's an incredibly talented footballer. I think his problem in the summer was, once you're at Man City, where do you really go from there? Anything seems like a step down, really, other than making a move to maybe PSG, who clearly weren't going to be in for him this summer. Bayern Munich, but again, that's not really the kind of profile of player that they would have been going for this summer. The Spanish clubs are gone. So he kind of had to stay at Man City, and look how well he's made it work. It's been fantastic. And for Man City's benefit, they now sit top of the league, Dave. Are you still pretty confident that they'll go on and secure the title from this position?
Going off of what we've seen them do against the big teams, against Liverpool in the big games, we've seen them dominate games, and even against Liverpool, they should have beat Liverpool. Liverpool were fortunate to get a. So if it's all about consistency for me, and like you mentioned there, if they can kind of iron out any inconsistencies, like I say, when they do have an unfortunate result like they did against Crystal Palace, for instance, about bouncing back, and we've seen Pep sort of, he's been able to kind of keep them in line, I think, and I feel as though they're probably the favourites for me. But again, we've seen the game. Obviously, Liverpool did play particularly well against Wolves. Obviously, they had a few chances, but they managed to get the win, and we've seen them do that a lot in the title. Chelsea, don't get me wrong, will be well up there as well. It's about bouncing back though, really. But we've seen them do that this season as well. So it's completely wide open. Again, it's only a number of points in it, separating a couple of points, separating third, first. So again, it's going to be an interesting one, and You don't
Yeah,
really
and it's
want.
not the only thing that's wide open really in the league right now. We also talk about that race for fourth and whether West Ham can keep their place, but the table's looking really interesting. West Ham obviously sit fourth, just behind them are Tottenham, then Man United, then Arsenal, who obviously play tonight. So out of the teams that are competing for fourth, let's focus on Spurs quickly. They have now won 3 league games in a row under Conte. Now, granted, he probably would have expected them to win those 3 games, if not maybe 4 after they drew with Everton as well. But what are you seeing from Antonio Conte's Tottenham? And do we think that they will be able to sustain that challenge for fourth? Are they maybe now almost the favourites for fourth? What do we think of them so far?
I think almost the litmus test is almost going to be when they play their next big game, really, and how how we see they deal with playing some of the bigger teams. Because obviously the last time they played United, they looked absolutely terrible, and that was playing another manager that was obviously out the door a few weeks after as well. So I feel as though we will see what they're made of when they come up against one of the big boys in the next few weeks. I'm not sure when their next game is against one of the top, but that'll be a real test. But I mean, you can only say obviously the last three games, obviously, like you say, they've strung 3 wins together, and it's, they're starting to look to kind of put together a bit of consistency. And they were convincing in their win against Norwich and obviously against Brentford in the week. No pushovers either. They've obviously upset a few teams this season. So I mean, Conte, himself, he seems to have them well structured. I feel as though his particular methods. We know how strict he is as a manager and how meticulous he is with his planning and how he likes his teams to play. I feel as though that Tottenham team will definitely kind of relish him coming in, and he won't give them any choice but to believe in his ideas. So I feel that as a manager, you've got obviously the likes of Kane. I think a manager like him coming in, because obviously Kane kind of wanted to go on to bigger and better things. I can imagine it would be a motivational factor in him kind of looking to kind of potentially raise his game. I know we've still not really seen him.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about that, to be fair, because there have been a few players that have kind of stepped up a little bit this season. I know we've seen a lot more of Lucas Moura, who scored a wonderful goal this weekend. He seemed to just beat everyone on the pitch. He took the ball around about 4 players before lashing it home. It was absolutely fantastic. So, although Tottenham are hitting some form and are starting to win games, still no Harry Kane really for them. He still seems pretty absent. So, with the January transfer window approaching and with a new manager in who's definitely going to want to make his mark on the side, not necessarily a lot of funds available because Tottenham historically haven't spent a lot of money. What's Conte's job in the January transfer window, and how does he deal with what has now become the Harry Kane problem, which it seems an alien concept for Spurs? How would you deal with it if you were Conte?
It's a difficult one because he's still got a few years left on his contract, and we're left with no illusions that he wants to leave. And I don't know if he's still kind of stuck in 2 minds. And on it, I mean, rightfully, you'd probably be thinking, yeah, we've got Antonio Conte and he's a great manager, but we're hamstrung by the fact that we're limited with resources and what we can spend. Are we going to be able to are we going to be able to attract the kind of players to the club that we need to compete against the best? So you can kind of understand that he's in 2 minds. No doubt, obviously, his performance levels can be a lot better. We've seen him obviously score goals for England in the last couple of games, albeit against very poor opposition. So, you have to kind of question whether he is actually really actually at those levels to score those goals against those opposition. But I mean, I think we'll see in the coming weeks. We've seen the likes of, like you mentioned there, Lucas Moura kind of come to the fore and really kind of look lively, especially in the last few games. And Son is, he's looking good again. Went through a little bit of a rough patch towards the end of Nuno's reign. So, it'll be interesting to see how they do in the next few weeks. But again, I feel as though they'll probably be one of the competitors 100% for that fourth position. As long as they can stay consistent, that's another big if. It's still early days, and we've seen, there's a lot of good teams for that fourth place position.
Well, it's bizarre with Kane, isn't it? Because we're looking at a striker who last season scored 23 goals and got 14 assists. So far this season, he's got 1 goal and 1 assist. That's not just because he was a one-season wonder. If you look at Harry Kane's record, it's astonishing to think we'd be approaching December and he'd have 1 league goal. Absolutely bizarre. But even without him scoring, Tottenham, they're definitely in a driving seat for a 4th place finish. They've got a game in hand as well. Let's not forget, after their game with Burnley was cancelled, and they're only 2 points off 4th. So we could be seeing them in 4th spot come the end of the season, but not if big man Ralph has anything to say about it, right? Just a quick mention for Man United, who got their time under Ralph Rangnick off to a winning start, a 1-0 win thanks to Fred and his right-footed finish, which who know that he could do that, apparently. Did you see anything in this game, Dave, to give you any encouragement that Man United are back?
Yeah, I don't know, it's too early to say we're back. Obviously, a game into his reign. But 100%, I think the game against, obviously, we didn't speak about the Arsenal game, but that was a massive result for us.
Bizarre game. A fantastic game of football, a really, really good result. But my word, a very bizarre game. We'll come to another bizarre moment that led to a goal or didn't lead to a goal when we talk about Villa Leicester. But just quickly, seeing as you've mentioned it, what did you make of Smith Rowe's goal in that game?
Oh, ridiculous.
It's chaos.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? I think De Gea it seemed like he thought that it was an Arsenal player that
definitely
did, but it was, turned out to be Fred.
It's always Fred.
The referee, it seemed as though he went to blow his whistle and then waiting to see what happened with the ball, which is just strange in itself. I think he just got caught a little bit off guard, really, and it was literally a split second. He went to blow his whistle and then kind of didn't. He could see the keeper was down, but I think he just the things to him unfold, but then realised that he'd already let the goal go in, and by that point, it was a goal. He couldn't do anything about it. So
I'm not sure he needed to do anything about it. I think weirdly, inadvertently, he did the right thing because De Gea wasn't injured. He played the rest of the game. He was absolutely fine. He thought he'd been fouled and went down to try and get a free kick. Maybe the referee had already seen it was Fred that made the contact. I don't know, but it was a bizarre moment. It was weird for Arsenal to keep going, but
yeah, I don't doubt that he was, in some sort of pain at the time. But like we say, he did go on and play the rest of the game. I know a lot of people have been saying, oh, well, if he was actually injured, then and he ended up going off the pitch as a sub, then, maybe, you'd probably be saying, yeah, something should have been done about it. But regardless, if an injury is an injury and the goalkeeper's completely taken out of the game, you can't just play on. It's just ridiculous. We're gonna be seeing that every week. If a goalkeeper goes down, is injured, you just play on, then anything can happen. You're going to see that a lot.
Or you set the other precedent where goalkeepers just think, right, I'll just go down here, and then they'll have to stop the game and they can't score a goal. It's a bit of a paradox, really.
Exactly. But you say that every week, and you see players. We see it week in, week out. Players going down with the faintest touch. A player, gets a slight tap on the face with a hand, and them going down, and it doesn't get called out. Commentators don't say, that's ridiculous. That's clearly, there's nothing wrong with it. They kind of just choose to sort of ignore it. Referees don't book players for diving. Majority of 60, 70%, 80% of the time, I'd say it doesn't get punished.
Yeah.
So we're kind of really bringing this on ourselves, really, as, the officials are not helping the situation. I think there was a game the other day. I'm not sure if it was the Liverpool game. Someone did get booked for diving, but there was contact. So
Was that? Well,
it
to be
could.
honest, I've always thought that goalkeepers are overprotected, so I didn't mind seeing this, and we'll talk about that in a bit more later. In that game, obviously, Ronaldo came to the rescue. His 800th and 801st career goals as well, which is absolutely outstanding. But back to this weekend's game and the narrow 1-0 win. Were there any players or any changes in the system that particularly stood out to you that Rangnick put in place?
Yeah, so obviously we saw Fred's part in the game. I think for me, it's always been apparent that he suits like a pressing team. His energy that he has and carries the team, but he really shone in this particular game because he was kind of the player in that we played that obviously 4-2-2-2 system.
Mm.
Where obviously he had the two front players in Ronaldo, Rashford, and Jadon Sancho, and Bruno sat just behind them in two number 10 positions. And obviously then you had McTominay, Fred. But it's become apparent that we are trying to win the ball obviously higher up the field. As we've seen with his the Red Bull teams, they're kind of renowned for their style, and Leipzig we've seen in the Champions League the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They play so high up the pitch that it's a way of controlling games, because if you can win the ball higher up the pitch, you actually stop the obviously possession in your own half. You nullify any threats. We've actually didn't concede a great deal of chances. I think there was one chance where Ayew should have scored, at least got it on target. It was terrible.
He's
Absolutely
not
terrible.
a good footballer. I saw him at Aston Villa for long enough. He is not a good footballer. He has moments where he's passable and a couple of moments where you think, oh, wow, he's got something. He doesn't. He's not a good footballer.
But I think that was the only chance I can remember. And to be honest, let's be honest, it's a Palace team that's impressed this season. They've gone through a couple of tough games, obviously, recently.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, they've beaten Man City. They've got a couple of good results against some big teams. So
I do wonder whether Palace are starting to settle into what I kind of expected Palace to be this season, though. I wonder if their kind of new manager bounce is starting to wear off a little bit, I will say. Because I watched them against Villa the other week and I thought they were absolutely terrible, particularly in the first half. And like you say, they didn't offer anything in this game really either. It feels like there could be a bit of coming unstuck here.
yeah,
Just
again,
sorry,
like you said, it's not just kind of finding a style of play and a way of playing. It's about having the right profile of player and whether they're disciplined enough to stick to that style of play and put in 110% in every game of playing. For instance, it looks like Vieira likes to press and likes a pressing team, and we saw them do that well in the early parts of the season, and I think it's fallen off a little bit. And again, like you say, it'll be interesting to see if it just kind of their season unfolds in a pretty way. But I suppose we'll see with that. But back to United, I think there was plenty of things to be encouraged about in that performance. The first 30 minutes of the game, we were brilliant. I think that's first. I think I was reading that's the first time the most amount of times we've won possession in the final third of the opponent's half since Sir Alex Ferguson left. I think we won possession 12 times in their final third, which is brilliant. You can see a structure as well. I mean, I don't know how many people look at sort of like heat maps and sort of average positions of players after game, but there was a clear setup and structure with that team, and it'll be interesting to see how well we can do, because obviously he's only had 1.5 training sessions, so certainly it's definitely going to be a fascinating watch these next few games. And United have got a brilliant run these next 10 games. I think the best team they play is West Ham. I think that's sort of mid-January time. So between now and February the 12th. I think the majority of their teams that they play are bottom half clubs, so they could be, much further up the table by that the end of that time comes. But again,
I'm trying to think if you're playing Villa in that time and whether I need to be offended or not.
Yeah, I think it's the game before West Ham.
Well, then you can take that comment back. Thank you very much, because they're not the bottom half anymore. They're up to 10th.
Well, you know what I mean. None of the big boys, basically.
Hey, stop it. We won a European Cup about 40 years ago. But just quickly on Man United, I think it's noticeable that even though this was Rangnick's first game since Solskjaer's gone, there has been a bit of a change in the way that they've played. And I think Fred is a really good embodiment of that. Someone who's often been derided in the English game and kind of mocked as this comical figure. But he does bring something to Man United in the right system, like you say. His pressing ability and his energy is fantastic. He's just not necessarily the most technically gifted player. And we've talked about this. If he plays next to another midfielder that he can lay the ball off to more often, and he can do that running and that pressing, then it works for me. And that's why Man United spent the money on him. I do wonder whether Fred is the only way you get Pogba into a Rangnick team. Because I can't imagine Pogba doing half the things that Fred would be able to do. But at the same time, Pogba's able to do a lot more on the ball. So perhaps they're a bit more of a settled partnership under someone like Rangnick.
McTominay isn't good enough.
No.
Certainly not as a first 11 player.
Definitely not.
He's not really. Certainly in the game just gone, he just doesn't stamp his authority. I just don't think he's got the nous to, and I don't think he's good enough to be a player in midfield for United. And we need to look for better, basically. You're right to say about Fred. Like, he offers far more as a player than what McTominay does, and defensively, he's so much better. His awareness and of his surroundings, and kind of knowing when to press, and the amount of ridiculous fouls that McTominay gives away is, just those players that you're always thinking, why are you giving those free kicks away? We will be looking, I think, for a midfielder. There's a lot of rumours about. I can't think of his name now, but he's at Leipzig.
Christopher Nkunku, I've seen a few times.
Nkunku is a brilliant prospect.
But he's not necessarily midfielder. He can be, but he plays also as a number 10, also up front, plays also on the right. I'm not really sure where he'd fit in at United, as good as he is at football. I wonder if that's a lazy link, to be honest, just because he's Leipzig's best player right now.
Amadou, he's a midfielder at Leipzig. I can't think of his name now. But
I haven't seen any other rumours, to be honest.
But he's been linked. I don't know if it's just the laser connection because of obviously the Leipzig connection.
Well, it'd be interesting to see whether Rangnick brings anyone in January, even considering that we expect that he won't be managing come next season.
Good thing, I think he's done a good thing by saying in his press conference, he came out and said, he's not looking at the transfer window. It's difficult to buy January anyway, but he's happy with the players he's got, and he's happy to work with what we've got. And I think that's a good statement, really, because it kind of gets the players, to realise, actually willing to trust us and to kind of explore his options. And the good thing about that game as well is we brought Anthony Elanga on 0-0 when we still weren't winning the game. We brought him on for Rashford. And I was reading on Saturday night that Rangnick was impressed by his first training session, and it was really impressed with Anthony Elanga. So it just kind of goes to show the faith that he's got in players and performing players in training, because we've heard about players being good. We heard about Van der Beek apparently being brilliant in training, and players wondered why he wasn't getting the opportunities. And Ollie just didn't really, he wasn't bold enough to make those decisions and pull players out that weren't performing, and kind of give opportunities to other players that deserved the opportunities. So he's definitely, let's be honest, he clearly believes in his decisions and giving opportunities to young players. We've seen young players come through at those clubs who he's been with in the past, and I've read somewhere that at Leipzig he got rid of the under-23s team, stuck with the under-18s, and basically kind of just said, these players need to go out on loan, they need to be sold so they can further their development at another club, or we need to give them opportunities in the first team, which in my opinion, I feel as though that's a good step, really. And there's a lot of talk of whether under 23s is just a little bit of a it just puts a stagnant on players' careers, just kind of being in those those games too long and at late ages, and around 20, 21-year-olds. I think players do need to be playing first team football these days.
We've ended up talking about Man United again for ages somehow, but I suppose I've not talked to you since Rangnick came in. I really hope that Mike can edit in the clip of you a couple of podcasts ago saying that Man United will never bring Ralph Rangnick in till the end of the season and bring him in on a sporting director role or something, because that would be too sensible. Here we are. Somehow it's happened. But there was other football going on in England. Of course, my beloved team, they got another win under Steven Gerrard. Thank you very much. 2-1 win for Aston Villa over Leicester. But really, the main thing that I wanted to talk about here was the bizarre decision, in my mind, it's bizarre anyway, to disallow Jacob Ramsey's goal. So, apparently, there has been a rule change that none of us know about. Everyone in the world would say that you cannot challenge the keeper if he has two hands on the ball. No, apparently if he has one hand on it and is in control of the ball, that is enough for it to be a foul. There is no way Schmeichel is in control of that ball. He parries the ball and then reaches out and puts one hand towards it. You cannot tell me he has grip of that ball. He does not have control of that ball until his second hand is on there. That ball, to me, is there for anyone to challenge for. He put his hand on it just maybe a millisecond before Ramsey kicks the ball. Now, if that was an outfield player who tried to kick the ball as Ramsey kicked it as well, as long as there wasn't contact, that goal stands. So why is it that Schmeichel was protected there, and why was that goal not given? I don't understand.
Yeah, even as United fan, I was frustrated to see that disallowed. I watched that game, and I was 100% sure that goal would be allowed, because in my view, in my opinion, and we've seen in the last few years, these moments have happened, and the rule has always been, if there's a one hand on the ball and the keeper is out of control, it's not under their control, then the goal will be allowed. So
his arm is fully outstretched. It's not even close to his body. He's got no way of bringing that ball in. He's just touched it. So Schmeichel must have known that rule, because no one else seemed to. It was absolutely bizarre. And I wasn't even sure what VAR were checking for when they first went to it. I thought he can't have been offside. I know he wasn't offside. So what is it? I don't know. If that is the rule, then it needs changing back, because there is nothing that should have stopped Ramsey. I thought it was a great finish. He anticipated it well. I thought he did really well for it, to be honest.
100%. And yeah, like you said there, I thought they were looking at an offside, because the commentators were talking about them looking at it, and I thought there's no way there's any offsides in there.
Yeah.
And it just, it's perplexing, really, to be honest, that how far do we take this? How far, what is in control of the ball then? Is it palm to ball? Is it one finger on the ball? If they've got one finger on the ball, does that class as they've got it under their control? Because there's just no clarity there, from what I understand anyway. And it's something that they're going to have to come out. It'd be interesting to see, because obviously
they've not said anything. They've avoided making a statement on it, I noticed as well, which I think is really telling. When you say that they obviously got to come out and talk about this, they haven't. Well, up to this date, anyway. I think the interesting thing, let's go away from that for a second. And obviously, we're talking about who might compete for the top four at the end of the season. No, I'm not trying to shoehorn Villa into that conversation. It's too early. But what I will say is, obviously, I think a lot of people would have expected Leicester to be in that conversation, because they have been for the last two seasons. They now sit 11th. And we saw in this game, I think, a lot of Leicester's flaws, where there are moments where they look really sharp, and Harvey Barnes took his goal very, very well. But then for the rest of the game, I don't know about you, Dave. Did you think they offered much?
It's a strange one for me because it seems as though I don't know whether he's trying to kind of please some players by kind of shoehorning them into this 11. Obviously, we've seen Maddison kind of come back into the fray recently, and he did well in the last couple of games previous to this.
He did,
but I just don't know whether he's a player that has the defensive kind of side to his game to make that team work.
And that's their problem, isn't it? Their defence has fallen apart. Someone as young as Wesley Fofana, who I think is only 22, being missing, should not bring the defence down to the level that it's been at this season. Johnny Evans is an incredibly experienced player. Now, I know he's had some time out through injury as well, but he was back in this game. I don't know what's happened to Soyuncu, but they're in double figures now for the amount of times they've conceded from set pieces. 2 in this game. What's happened to Leicester in terms of their back line? Because Brendan Rodgers is a manager that we would imagine would get them organised. So why can't Leicester defend anymore?
The thing is, they've had so many injuries and kind of absences from their defence that they've not been able to kind of build any real sort of consistency in there. Really.
Yeah.
I think I definitely still feel their miss. I know he's been missing for a long while, but James Justin, I feel like
massively
very good in their defence. Defensively, he was sound as well as going forward. They really do miss him. I think the sooner they can get him back, hopefully, if he kind of produces the same sort of form, I've no doubts if he hadn't got injured, he would have got a chance with England at some point. At this point in time. For me, before he got injured last season, I thought he was their player of the season.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, it's about getting Fofana back. But, we've seen, obviously, the likes of Soyuncu has looked all out of sorts at times this season.
He looks awful.
He conceded a lot of big chances as well. It's a strange one, really. And, it's worrying because it doesn't look like he knows what the clear fix is, really.
No.
Conceding these goals. I think they play zonal marking, don't they?
Yeah. And I can't understand how long that lasts for, because once you start to see that leak, and once you start to see players like Conte was completely free for that header. Soyuncu is close, but it was so easy for him. And that's your centre-back. That's Villa's second biggest player behind Mings to get in the box and try and head that ball in, and you don't pick him up. That's appalling defending to me. I think the thing that alarmed me was that Leicester starting 11 in this game didn't say much, did it? Really? Where's the quality gone from that side? I know they've got some injuries. I know that, and you've got to account for that. But when you think that, all right, Tielemans wasn't there, Ricardo Pereira, Jamie Vardy was on the bench. After that, there were players I'd never blinking heard of that play in. I thought Leicester seemed like they've dropped off so far. And obviously, they've got European football to compete with still as well. Wow, for now. I think it's a difficult space for Leicester right now, and they're definitely not going to be in the top 4 conversation anymore. But I imagine this was the first time you've seen a full 90 minutes of a Steven Gerrard's Aston Villa. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean...
What did you make of it?
Do you know what? It's the thing about, obviously, since Gerrard has come in, I feel as though the main thing about Villa is they've looked, their structure's been really solid, and they're not an easy team to play against. And, you see the sort of dedication that the players have shown and the commitment, and, they've looked really aggressive in their play. One thing I didn't notice from watching them against Leicester, they're quick onto any sort of 50-50 challenges. And, with, that kind of resembles Steven Gerrard as a player, and he's definitely earned their respect, I feel. And a manager like him coming into that club, I feel as though, especially for the younger players, obviously we've seen the likes of Carney come in, who's actually really good when he's come into the
He looked
team.
fantastic when he came on, Chukwuemeka, and we've heard a lot about him at Villa for a really long time. And there's talks of him potentially going elsewhere in the summer because his contract is up, and there's some big teams in for him. His brother's actually in our youth setup as well, and he's really good too, Caleb. But I think the biggest thing for me with Gerrard so far, like you say, is he seems to have a really good system set up. Where in this game we saw it a lot at Rangers too. He played with almost two number 10s. So rather than playing the wide players that we've got, Buendia and Ramsey both kind of played as a number 10, with Nakamba, McGinn, and Douglas Luiz all sitting behind, and it worked fantastically. Because, like you say, anytime the defence had the ball for Leicester, that's an older defence who's a bit slower at times. They were on them. And Watkins, he deserves a massive mention because he has been fantastic in the last few games. His energy that he brings is just, it's uncomparable, really. And you can see why Southgate rates him so much and why he's keeping Danny Ings out of the team as well. So I've been really proud of the Villa side in the last 4 games. I think if you'd offered Gerrard 3 wins and a narrow loss to Man City, where you probably should have got a point in his first 4 games, he'd have bitten your hand off. So job well done from him so far, and we'll see where Villa can climb to because we're already out of trouble. We're now in 10th, so it's a tight league. Who knows? The other quick game worth mentioning hasn't happened yet, but we talked about people that might compete for the top 4. Arsenal are definitely still in that conversation, but it's their opponents, Everton, I want to mention briefly, who are on a really rough run, really. People talking about Agent Rafa, and maybe he's still linked to Liverpool after the shocking Derby defeat. They're on an incredibly poor run, Dave. And now there's talk that the fans are going to form a protest tonight. Apparently, on the 27th minute, Everton fans will leave the ground because they have not won a trophy in 27 years come the end of the season. And they're unhappy with how the club has been running. A club that spent 50 million on Richarlison, I think 40 million on Sigurdsson, brought in about 18 different number 10s in one summer a few years ago. They've spent a lot of money, Dave. So if Everton fans have got a problem with the ownership and how they're being run, is it justified? And also, what needs to change there?
I would definitely question some of the decisions that have been made at the club, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. Their recruitment policy seems to be scattergun approach. We've seen, a few experienced players come in for big money. We've seen a variety of different managers come in. Obviously, we've seen Koeman come in over the last few years. Obviously, he didn't stick around for long. Silva, we've just now got Rafa Benitez, who I feel as though is just it was such a bizarre appointment for me. Obviously, such an experienced manager, but for me, Everton, they're really a club that should be looking to kind of look for something potentially not so. Really, somebody like Graham Potter, as a coach. For me, I feel as though fans will be looking at that and thinking, do you know what, this is actually a really good appointment for us, the way that Brighton play. Because how long has it been since we've seen Everton play good football? The team.
That's a good question. And it's funny as well because it's not for a lack of trying, but they just don't seem to have an identity, like you say. I mean, they've had a lot of injuries this season, which accounts for some of their problems. Obviously, they've been missing Calvert-Lewin, who is definitely their focal point in attack and a very good forward, which would affect any team. I think Yerry Mina is back in the lineup tonight after a long period out. But I'm just looking at a list of players that Everton have signed over the last few years. And if you read some of these names off and the fees that came with them, they obviously bought Gylfi Sigurdsson, who there's different problems there. Richarlison, they had Lukaku for a while, who they sold for big money. Alex Iwobi, they spent 30 million on. Yerry Mina. Jordan Pickford was big money. Moise Kean, who's gone already. Ben Godfrey was big money. Davy Klaassen disappeared. Alan was pretty big money and a big name. James Rodriguez, he didn't last. Andre Gomez. So it's not for a lack of trying. Some of these names are very good players and it came from good parts of their career or at least with a big pedigree and profile, yet it's not clicking. And Benitez was meant to be the person to come in and get it click. Is it his fault? Is he doing something wrong? Or can we simply blame the injury crisis? They also had a very limited transfer window after Benitez came in because of financial fair play. So what's Everton's biggest problem this season then?
Oh, it's definitely been big inconsistency in their performances. I think the alarming thing for me is they've been easy to beat. The big teams have beaten them easily, barring Man United. Obviously, they managed to get a 1-1 draw with, even when missing a few players. That's probably been their best result this season. Isn't saying seeing how bad United have been. But against Liverpool, they were absolutely shocking. Really, it was and it's strange really because coming off of the back of is it last season when they managed to beat Liverpool, I think it was. They've I think the fans had a lot to be optimistic about, and it was the start of last season when they actually started racking points up, didn't they? And they were actually right at the top of the table.
Yeah,
and there was a lot of optimism, and fans were Goodison Park was actually it was booming really, and the fans at home games were actually looked like they were starting to enjoy watching Everton again. And again, it seems to all have unfolded, and for one reason or another, I just don't know why these strange decisions are being made. Who's making these footballing decisions at the club with these appointments in their recruitment in terms of players and management policy? Because in my opinion, they've let a lot of good players leave that club as well. But obviously, you look at the likes of Lookman, who's now at Leicester, looked brilliant at Fulham last season when he was there for that period of time. Delafeu, who was probably their best player before he left. It's these players that they have had good players, and for some reason or another, they've just let them go, or that it's not being the project there to keep them at the club that makes them think, actually, I believe in this. I want to be a part of this. And
who do they turn to for quality on the pitch right now with those injuries that have happened when they let someone like James go? Now, he might not be the most consistent player. He might not have the highest work ethic either. But when you are looking at a team who now have picked up 2 points since the 25th of September, and they now sit 5 points off the bottom of the league. This is Everton we're talking about. They should have someone to just create a bit of magic, even with the injuries. I think people would have expected it to have been Richarlison, but they just don't look anywhere near it. Now, they play Arsenal tonight, who obviously are competing for a place in the top four themselves. And other than losing to Liverpool and Man United, they've been on a very good run of form too, safe to say. Or they're kind of just getting the results that you'd expect Arsenal to get, really. When you look at the games they've lost and the games they've won, there's not much you can argue other than the fact that they're starting to click. So who's the winner for tonight's fixture? It's very rare we make predictions on this podcast, so I'm going to challenge you to make one.
I'm going to say that it's going to be Arsenal just because I've not seen anything to be encouraged about from Everton's side this last few games, especially. And like you mentioned, 2 points since the 25th of September.
Shocking.
It's relegation form, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it definitely is.
We've seen expect the unexpected from Arsenal. That's been quite common from them. Over the last few years. So you never know, but I'm going to say it's got to be Arsenal as the favourites. I don't know what the score is going to be. It could be a draw. It could be.
Well, we're recording this just before that game starts, so it'll probably go live after the results come in and Everton have got a 5-0 win and we'll all look stupid. But we are going to leave it there for this evening now. Thank you so much for your time, Dave. Thank you to anyone that's been able to watch or even listen on Spotify too, because, we're on there, Football Diary Podcast on Spotify. Let's see if we can hit everyone's most popular podcast in Spotify Unwrapped by next year. That'd be fun to see. What was yours, Dave? What was your top Spotify song this year?
I can't even actually. I've not actually had a look yet.
That's 100% a lie. That means it's something like Carly Rae Jepsen or something, isn't it? I don't know. You've just been banging WWE theme music the whole time. You've got Cult of Personality at the top still.
Oh, yeah. Of course. That's me.
Maybe. Well, you can also follow us on our socials at Football Diary UK on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can join our chat on Discord too. But until then, thank you so much for watching. We'll be with you next week. Thank you for joining me, Dave.
Enjoyed it. See you again. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.